What's up, Starshines? Sylvia Moonbeam here. The weather's pretty hot outside, so I'm a little, well, let's just say I'm not looking as pretty as I normally do. So today you get to see little Sylvie. Today I thought it'd be fun to tackle my favorite Pokemon of each type. There will be more than one, especially for certain types, as you'll see, but these are completely based on my own opinions. If you don't agree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, if you disagree, leave a comment below telling me some of your own favorite Pokemon of each type. That being said, let's roll that intro and get started. Let's start this countdown off right with a couple honorable mentions. First up is Tyranitar. Tyranitar used to be one of my favorites, and during my Fire Red playthrough was actually one of the strongest members of my team. This, of course, was when I was still fairly new and didn't really understand the whole concept of pseudo-legendaries. I just thought Tyranitar was a powerful Rock-type Pokemon. I used Tyranitar fairly consistently throughout Generation 4, 5, and even a little bit during Generation 6, but once I started to make more diverse teams starting in Generation 6, Tyranitar kind of fell by the wayside. While I still love Tyranitar to this day, I wouldn't consider it one of my favorites anymore. Other runner-up on this list is actually my girlfriend's favorite Pokemon, Hydreigon. Because the most important woman in my life is such a big Hydreigon fan, I couldn't do this list without dropping a little Hydreigon in. Love you, sweetie. For the first type on this list, we're making things creepy with the Bug type. Surprisingly, Bug is the only type on this list that only has one Pokemon. Believe it or not, I actually looked through all of the other types, and Volcarona is the only Pokemon that even has the Bug typing. Bug is not bad. In fact, there's many Bug Pokemon I do like Galvantula, but when I was doing this countdown, I just couldn't put any of the rest of them on the list. Volcarona has been one of my favorites since Generation 5. Originally, I had a Volcarona named Mothra before eventually breeding a better Volcarona in Gen 7, which I named Candlerack. Next up, we're going to the Dark type. For longtime fans of me who have seen multiple lists of mine, it should be no surprise that Darkrai is one of my favorite Dark types. I've loved Darkrai since Darkrai's debut movie, and every time a Darkrai shows up in an anime, such as when one was used by Tobias, I absolutely love it. However, thanks to Generation 8, I have another Pokemon in the Dark section, Grimmsnarl. Believe it or not, I actually don't like Grimmsnarl because of its fairy typing. I think it's an awesome Dark type. My personal Grimmsnarl is named Jotun, after the Frost Giants. Next up, we're going to the Dragon type. No one should be surprised by this particular one, but my favorite Dragon type is Rayquaza. Who doesn't love Rayquaza? Ever since Destiny Deoxys, Rayquaza has been one of the coolest Pokemon in my mind, and its appearance in Brawl, as well as the Delta episode, have just further solidified my love for the big green sky serpent. The other dragon that I want to include is Goodra. I always thought Goodra was pretty cute. However, the fact that Goodra is one of my girlfriend's favorite Pokemon, as well as one of the favorite Pokemon of one of my close friends, Miko, I kind of have to include this on its list. Unlike with Hydreigon, where it's just a Pokemon that someone I love loves, it's a Pokemon I like that two people who are close to me also like. So it has a lot of sentimental value. Next up, we have the Electric type. I gotta include my buddy Magnezone on this list. Magnezone is super cool. Ever since I first played Emerald, I have always loved Magnemite and Magneton, and the fact that they get an even cooler, even tankier version in the form of Magnezone is even better. My personal Magnezone is named Megaton, which is a Fallout reference, and I have Body Press on it now that we're in Generation 8. Considering defense is Magnezone's highest stat, Body Press is phenomenally good. My other inclusion for this is Zapdos, the only legendary bird I'm actually a fan of. I'm not sure why, but I have a strangely close connection with the Thunderbird, and the fact that Zapdos is the Thunderbird incarnate has always made me like it. Anyone who's been following my channel for a while, or has at least just seen my channel intro, knows that the fairy type is my favorite type. Ironically, I only have 2 entries for this list because a lot of my favorite fairy types are dual types, like you saw with Grimmsnarl. However, as a pure fairy type, I of course have to give it to my girl Sylveon. I have 2 Sylveons that I use. One is named Q, who is a original Sylveon, and I have Kari, who is a shiny Sylveon. They run similar sets, and both of them are very near and dear to my heart. Plus, if you know a little bit of my own backstory, you'll partially understand why I love this Pokemon so darn much. The other entry for Fairy is not Mawile, but Mega Mawile. I had a Mawile in my original run of Emerald, and I thought it was pretty cool, but it just wasn't powerful enough for the late game, and ended up switching it out for a Gyarados. However, once Mawile got a Mega Stone in Generation 6, I fell in love again. Mega Mawile makes Mawile's design even cooler, and it's an even stronger Pokemon that packs such a punch. It's an absolute glow-up. If it were up to me, Mega Mawile would just be a fairly standard evolution. The fact that it's locked behind a Mega Stone does mean I haven't been able to use one come Generation 8, but hopefully Game Freak will come to their senses and give us Mega Stones back soon. My first entry for the fighting type shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone who's been following the series for a while. It's Lucario. Lucario is an awesome Pokemon, and Lucario and the Mystery of Mew was actually the first Pokemon movie I got on DVD. I've seen that movie probably 15-20 times, and that's just to my memory. My own personal Lucario is named Gaururu, combining Gau, which is Japanese for roar, and Garuru, which, despite its connection with Digimon, Garuru is actually onomatopoeia for howling. So Gaururu is kind of a portmanteau, meaning a howling roar, or kind of like a thunderous roar, and I always thought that was a really cool idea. My other inclusion for fighting is Gallade. Gallade's really cool. I've always personally been more of a fan of Gardevoir myself, but my love for Gallade grew when I was doing my first Wonderlock. About a third of the way through the game, during one of my Wonderlocks, I actually, ironically enough, traded away the Lucario that Corina gave me for a shiny Gallade. That shiny Gallade, named Slice, was never used on my team because I didn't want it to die during the Wonderlock. I kept it in my box, and when I successfully completed the Wonderlock, it was the only Pokemon I transferred to my Moon version to keep as a permanent piece of my collection. For the Fire type, both of these are fairly recent entries. First I'll cover Colossal. Colossal's a pretty cool Pokemon, and I definitely think it really stands out as the big rock type of Generation 8 compared to Pokemon we've previously seen like Golem, Alola Golem, Gigalith, or others. Maybe it's the fire typing added in, or maybe it's the giant burning pile of coal, I'm not sure, but Colossal definitely is one of my favorite rock types, but I'm including it under fire. Also under fire, I'm including Alolan Marowak. I always kind of liked Marowak when I was playing the Kanto games, but it just wasn't powerful enough, in my humble opinion, to make it worth keeping on my team for a long period of time. This all changed during my run of Ultra Sun, in which I added a Alolan Marowak to my team. During my run of Moon, I already had a Decidueye, and I was planning to get a Mimikyu, and I thought that having 3 ghost types would be overkill. But during my Ultra Sun run, I did not use Mimikyu or Decidueye, and I wanted to have a ghost type. So I threw Alolan Marowak on, and by howdy, it basically ran my team for me. While I am including it under fire or the flying type, I first have Sigilith. I wasn't a big fan of Sigilith during Generation 5, but come Generation 6, I discovered how cool it was once I discovered the fairly standard tank set of using Cosmic Power, Stored Power, and then Psycho Shifting a burn onto an opponent. My particular Sigilith is named Viracocha, after the Nazca creation god. My other flying type representative here is Celesteela. Celesteela is arguably one of the coolest Pokemon to come out of the Ultra Beasts, and the fact that it's also one of the heaviest makes its heavy slams deal massive damage even to other rock or steel types. My friend Morgan is also a pretty big fan of Celesteela, so when I was writing my Pokemon fanfic, I just had to give her a Celesteela to use as her personal flying ride Pokemon. I already mentioned Alolan Marowak, but it's time for the other two ghosts. As you probably guessed, Mimikyu is one of the ghosts on my list. I absolutely love Mimikyu. From the moment it was revealed, I thought it was the cutest thing, and I actively consider Mimikyu my second favorite Pokemon, behind Sylveon. The other ghost on this list is Drifblim. My personal Drifblim is named Ozone, and it uses a stockpile set to get big defenses, and uses a combination of acrobatics plus unburden on a weakness policy. If the beach ball that little Sylvie is holding looks familiar to you, hopefully you'll have figured it out by now, but for the grass type I have to include Sceptile. My original Sceptile, Leafhead, was my first Pokemon when I started Emerald all those years ago. I later bred for a better Sceptile named Sherwood, and she is a massive powerhouse of my team. The other grass Pokemon in this section is Whimsicott. I absolutely adore Whimsicott, though, similar to Sigilith and Volcarona, I didn't really use one a lot until Generation 6. In Generation 5, Whimsicott was just another grass type, and since I always go with the grass types for my starters, I didn't really give Whimsicott another thought. However, come Generation 6, when Whimsicott was given the fairy typing, I suddenly had another reason to look into it. I think Whimsicott is an absolute cutie pie, and the fact that it can use Prankster Roost, or Prankster Defog, or Prankster Leech Seed, or Prankster Tailwind makes it an absolute awesome member of a team to use as a support Pokemon. And look at that little face, it's so cute. Next up for the ground type, we have two recent entries. Number one I want to cover is Runerigus. When I first saw Runerigus, I thought it was such a weird looking Pokemon, but it really grew on me. When trying to come up with names for Runerigus, I discovered its Japanese name is Death Barn, which barn doesn't necessarily refer to, say, the farm structure, but is actually a reference to the word for tablet. So it's literally a death tablet, or possessed tablet. However, I still thought it was funny that it had barn in its name, so my personal Runerigus is named Death Barn, and is heavily invested in defense for a body press set, also using iron defense. And of course, I have a Razor Claw for those critical earthquakes, or those super crit Shadow Claws. The other ground type I want to include is Zygarde Complete. I didn't give Zygarde much thought in Generation 6. It was a cool dragon ground Pokemon, but outside of the black and green color scheme, it didn't really stand out to me. Skip ahead to Pokemon Moon, and Zygarde blew my mind away. Its complete form was so cool that I had to get my hands on one. The moment I finished the story for Pokemon Moon, I hopped on Cerebi to find all of the Zygarde cells I had missed. Two more fairly recent entries for the Ice type. First up is Alolan Ninetales. I'll probably get some flack for this, but I'm actually not a big fan of the original Cantonian Ninetales. But, similar to Whimsicott, once Ninetales was given the Fairy typing in Generation 7, I began to fall in love with it. My personal Ninetales, named Snowdrift, has Snow Warning and Aurora Veil for a fairly standard Icy Tank set, and she goes hand in hand with my Mr. Rime. Mr. Rime is the other ice Pokemon I want to include. I wasn't super big on Mr. Rime at first, but they've grown on me a lot. I can honestly say that Mr. Rime is one of my favorite new Pokemon to be added in Galar, and I also just kind of like the idea of tap dancing Pokemon. it's time to represent the unelemental Pokemon with the normal type. First off, I gotta throw Eevee in here. Eevee is the only unevolved Pokemon on this list. Who doesn't like Eevee? Ask any true Pokemon fan, and you'll be hard-pressed to find any trainer who doesn't like Eevee or one of its evolutions. Just look at that cute little face. Once I played Let's Go Eevee, I began to like this little brown fox cat dog even more, and my Let's Go Eevee version was the originator of the Kari name that I now use on my shiny Sylveon. Next up is Porygon Z. I've always liked how the Porygon line looked. I always did think it was weird that they were normal type instead of electric type though. Porygon Z is my favorite of the line, though I do realize that most people consider an Eviolite Porygon 2 to be a better Pokemon. The last normal type I want to cover is Sylvali. Sylvali is another example of a Pokemon whose pre-evolution, type Null, would be better with an Eviolite, but I personally like Sylvali better. In my Pokemon fanfic, my Sylvali, named Sim, short for Simulacrum, is my main character's personal ride Pokemon. With use of its different elemental drives, is able to easily swim across water, climb up steep cliffs, or navigate the most treacherous of swamps, or even the most tepid of volcanoes. Both of my Pokemon for the poison type come from Generation 7. First up is Alolan Muck. I used Alolan Muck during my playthrough of Pokemon Ultra Sun, and it was a tanky powerhouse on my team who had surprising coverage considering I don't use many poison types. My other inclusion is Naganadal. I thought that Poipole was pretty cool during the game Ultra Sun itself, however its evolution was even neater. This poisonous dragon gun wasp, it's so weird that I just had to include it, and playing with my own Naganadal is pretty fun, and I look forward to being able to transfer it to my Pokemon Shield once Crown Tundra hits. As you probably guessed from the inclusion of Gallade, for the Psychic type I have to include Gardevoir. There aren't any other entries for the Psychic type, but to be fair I have covered other Psychic types such as Gallade himself and Mr. Rhyme. I first caught a Gardevoir during my playthrough of Pokemon Emerald, and she has been a part of I first caught a Gardevoir during my playthrough of Pokemon Emerald, and she was one of my favorite Psychic types ever since. The addition of Fairy type made her even cooler in my mind. Next up we have the Rock types. First I want to include Cradily. Cradily may seem like an odd option, especially once you learn that in my playthrough of Pokemon Emerald, I actually chose Armaldo. But later on, when I later received a Cradily from a friend, I fell in love with this strange sea anemone creature. My other inclusion is, believe it or not, two forms of the same Pokemon, Lycanroc. First up, I want to include my Dusk Lycanroc that I had in my playthrough of Ultra Sun. Dusk was a massive powerhouse and was 9 times out of 10 my Z-move user. The other inclusion I want to include though is Mr. Hyde, who was the shiny Midnight Lycanroc that I caught through SOS training in my playthrough of Pokemon Moon. I love how Midnight Lycanroc looks, and this deep blue shiny just made me fall in love with it. I will admit though, I do prefer Dusk Lycanroc, however, the visual styling of the shiny Midnight just takes the cake. Before the introduction of the Fairy type, Steel was actually my favorite type, and as anyone who has been following my channel for a long time knows, before I was Sylvia Moonbeam, I was Metagross Freak, so of course I have to include Metagross. I have loved Metagross since the moment I got Beldum in my Pokemon Emerald playthrough. Originally named Iron Ball, I admit I was terrible at nicknames then. Metagross has been one of my favorite tanky Pokemon, and my more current iteration, named Metaton, is a powerhouse and a Mega Evolution on one of my teams in Ultra Sun, using all 4 legs to smash opponents. Death by Glamour style. Next up on the Steel type is, surprisingly, another Hoenn Pokemon, Registeel. I think Registeel is really cool, and its inclusion in Lucario and the Mystery of Mew only made me love it more. My personal Registeel is named Topnada, which is the Russian word for torpedo. Given its size and shape, whenever my Registeel uses Iron Head, I always imagine it flies through the air, crashing into its opponents like a torpedo. As a third inclusion for the Steel type, I've got yet another Gen 8 Pokemon, Corviknight. Corviknight looks really cool, and honestly I think it does the Steel flying type better than both Celesteela and Skarmory before it. Corviknight looks like it could take a couple hits, it looks like it can deal massive damage, and honestly I wish we got an animation of flying on a Corviknight instead of just that fade to black with the animation in the corner. Personally, if we could fly over Galar like we flew over Hoenn in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire on the back of a Latios, I think people would love Corviknight even more. It's just such a cool Pokemon, and I really wish we got to see it in action better. Last but not least, we have the Water type, and despite me pretty much always choosing the Grass type Pokemon for my starters, I have to give a Water type shout out to starter Blastoise. Blastoise has been a favorite of mine since I played Fire Red, though I did have to receive it in a trade since I, of course, picked Bulbasaur. A chunky water type in its own regard, the fact that it can now use moves like Ice Beam, Scald, or Dark Pulse, Dragon Pulse, or Aura Sphere makes Blastoise super versatile, but I'm only including the special moves. Blastoise can also be a pretty good physical attacker too, and is definitely a Pokemon worth putting on your team if you want a solid water type. And the last Pokemon on this list is one I would again be remiss to include. We're looking at Rotom Wash. My Rotom Wash is named Buster because the way it holds its hose reminds me of a Ghostbuster. Ironic considering Rotom is in the washing machine. Well, those are my top Pokemon of each type. Did you like some of my favorites, or do you completely disagree with them? Let me know in the comments below what you think, and until next time, I'm Sylvia Moonbeam. See you next time, Starshines. Peace.